Join me in the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Welcome to the City of Westminster City Council Special Meeting of October 21st, 2024. We thank you for coming and would like to remind all in attendance that our meetings are subject to the rules of decorum that are posted inside the chamber doors. These rules are in effect while all meetings are in session, as well as during breaks and transitions between meetings. We want to be sure all feel welcome and remind you that there is an expectation that no attendee will disrupt this meeting and that threats and intimidation are prohibited. No attendee shall engage in audible expressions of support or opposition for any speaker. Signs and placards are prohibited, and all attendees shall remain seated in the seats provided in their aisles, not in the aisles, nor shall the doorways be blocked. There will be no general public comment this evening, but a public hearing on the adoption of the budget will take place. Each person will have 3 minutes to speak specifically about the budget. If you wish to comment on a different topic, the next opportunity for the public comment will be at the City Council meeting on Monday, October 28th. Roll call, please.
Councillor Carmelia.
Present.
Councillor DeMott.
Present.
Councillor Azadi.
Here.
Councillor Hott.
Present.
Mayor McNally.
Here.
Mayor Pro Tem Nurmela.
Here.
And Councillor Ireland.
Here.
There is a letter from me calling for a special council meeting tonight, and that brings us to the public hearing and first readings of and adoption of associated city council actions to adopt the 2025 budget. I will open the public hearing, and do we have anybody that wants to speak? Oh, sorry.
Do we need a motion for that?
Oh, yes, I always forget.
Thank you, Mayor. I'd move that we allow remote participation of Councilor Azadi and Hott.
Mayor Pro Tem?
Second.
It's been moved and seconded to approve Councilor Azadi and Hott to be remote.
I just have a quick question on this. I've asked prior, and I just want to make sure it's on the record. Are we at some point going to be able to see attendance of when people do remote or miss? Because there is part of our protocols is that there's a limitation to it, which is obviously at discretion of council whether or not we want to allow people to go above it. But it's hard to know if we're not going to have attendance for it.
Yes, we've updated those records and I can share them with council.
Awesome. Thank you so much.
Now, public hearing, and do we have anybody signed up to speak?
There was no vote on the actual participation.
Oh, sorry. All those in favor of allowing remote participation, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries. Now hold a public hearing. Do we have anybody to speak?
I do. The first speaker is Karen Calavity.
Welcome.
Hello. I guess I'm a little surprised that
No one else is on.
is here
Oh, there you go.
to speak about the budget, but I guess there comes a time when people realize that they're not being listened to anyway, so why bother showing up and talking about things that do affect people tremendously, like the budget, but seem to be ignored. I'm speaking specifically about the water treatment plant, which is a very expensive budget item. I don't think it's appropriate for that money to be spent in that way. There are several different options for treating our water that don't involve taking a site that's environmentally going to be compromised or, you know, putting a lot of pressure on people for water treatment that we should be. Just in the lobby, I got a little sheet for kids talking about stormwater cleanup. It was a drawing. And there's so many ways that we can take care of our water besides building a facility such as I saw on Tuesday. And I wish we would use a little bit more imagination and a little bit more care about how we're spending people's money. The same can be said for the courthouse, which I don't even know if that meets 2050 guidelines as far as energy emissions, carbon emissions, but we're gonna go ahead with supporting that as a city supposedly because, I don't know, somebody got a contract. I just don't get some of this stuff, that the people of the city don't have more voice, more understanding of what's happening behind closed doors here with the city council and executive sessions making these decisions about very important things.
Thank you.
The next speaker is John Palmer.
Welcome.
Thank you and good evening. In regards to the budget, I think we need to focus more on our core services. A little less of the pork barrel, a little less of the make me feel good donations to some of these charities and some of these off the wall crazy things that are in the budget. Let's take care of our core services. That's what the people want. They elected you to be responsible with our city's funds. And again, some of this stuff in the budget that I'm reading, these little special pork barrel projects, unconscionable. I also have a problem with how much money we're spending on the parks. This is crazy. We have plenty of parks that don't need millions of dollars to be refurbished. Again, that's crazy as line items in the budget. But more importantly, I'm concerned over, like I said, the pork barrel project, make me feel goods that you've all asked for. And I could be real specific and name them and name people, but I won't. You all know what I'm talking about and you know who I'm talking about. I wish you'd really think about this budget and do what the people need. Core services, police, fire, public works. Those are our core services that are in play every day, not these special little pork barrel projects that you're all asking for. Thank you.
Thank you.
That was our last speaker.
It's 6:39 and I'll close the public hearing. And that brings us to item 4A. Councilor's Bill number 31. Mayor Pro Tem.
I move to pass Councilor's Bill number 31 on first reading, amending the 2024 budgets of the General Utility Capital Project Reserve, Golf Course, Fleet, Investigation Recoveries, Parks, Open Space and Trails, and Capital Improvement Funds, and authorizing a supplemental appropriation from the 2023 carryover and 2024 revised revenues.
Second. Councilor Carmelia, second. It's been moved and seconded to pass Councilor's Bill number 31. Is there any further discussion? I'm going to let those I can't see talk first. Councilor Azadi? Anything?
Thank you, Mayor. And can you guys hear me?
Uh-huh.
I'm sorry if I cough in the middle of this. I'm coughing every few words, so apologies. I just wanted to say that this budget actually does cover city's core services. Millions of dollars are getting invested in our streets, into public safety. We're permanently funding the police department's victim services advocates, which do a very important job for us. It is important to maintain our open spaces. It's important to maintain our city assets. We're pouring millions of dollars into these things, and I'm just really proud of this group of people. The 7 of us for coming together and doing this. So that's all I wanted to say.
Councilor Hott?
Yes, I'll be brief. I just want to say that I'm really proud of what we accomplished collaboratively, and I'm really proud of this budget. Thank you so much.
Anyone else? Councilor Ireland?
I will be voting against this budget. I think there's too much pork
There are some core services we are focused on, but others we are not. And the water treatment plant, I am very disappointed with, as everyone knows, since I was a water warrior. And I know it's way over budget, and it's not providing the amount of water that we need to replace Semper like we were told we were going to do. So I would be voting no on everything to do with this budget. There's a lot of pork. There's too many employees in our city compared to the population already. Our population is like stagnant, and the city employees is increased 22% over the last few years. So almost 22% now that we're adding 9 more employees. So I will be voting no. Thanks.
Councilor Namella? Oh, I'm sorry, Mayor Pro Tem.
It's fine. I just want to say first, thank you to staff for going through a very methodical process with the council to come up with this budget. I think we had a lot of good conversation, and we certainly had areas where we have disagreement over the overall outcome, but I feel like we found a general consensus which did emphasize our core services. That's the kind of majority of what our budget is including, whether that's our courthouse or increasing funds for street improvements. A lot of these are big projects that have needed to happen, and I am glad that we are in a position where we can provide better services through these improvements. And safer services, in particular for the courthouse, but also we are increasing staffing for very targeted departments, and it's not a huge increase. It's actually very mild. So I think that we've done a good job of kind of limiting the new in this budget and tackling some of the services that we don't typically do as a city, where we are having to address some issues that have been brought up by our businesses, by residents that are concerned about people who are experiencing homelessness. How can we assist them get into more permanent housing? And so we're also, as Councilor Azadi mentioned, increasing our budget for victim advocates. So again, I think it's being responsive to the needs that we've heard, and we can't do everything, but I think we're making good progress with this budget.
Councilor Demott?
Thank you, Mayor. First, I wanted to ask a question. Manager Andrews, there was some comments made during public comment in terms of our process for the courthouse. And to me, I thought that was a very public process. So I was hoping that you could maybe shed some light to the public listening and exactly how we went through that process so that to get us to the point of building a new municipal court.
Thank you for the question, Councilor Demott. So I can't recall specific dates off the top of my head, but there were a number of public actions and public comment opportunities that took place to lead into the courthouse, the design and soon-to-be construction of the replacement municipal courthouse, including when contracts were approved for design, for the owner's representative, including a public hearing that took place prior to financing the COPs for the municipal courthouse. We've had a number of community advisory team meetings. There's an open house this Thursday. There was an open house earlier this year around the courthouse project. So it's been a fairly extensive project that staff has been undertaking to replace the municipal courthouse.
Thank you for the answer. I appreciate it. In terms of the budget, there, and you'll see that we'll read through a couple different sections of it, from pay plan to water rates. This particular portion of it going through our general fund and the bulk of the funds that we're going to expend as a city, I am not going to support. And it's one, I will say staff did a lot of good work, and I think council did a lot of good work, and we had a lot of collaboration. I think my big problem with it is, though, there is still too much not prioritized or not enough prioritized when it comes to our roads. I would also point back to last year's budget process when I asked, instead of 4.5%, to do half of that in water rate increases, because there is ability for us to utilize the general fund. I know it's complicated because of Tabor and having a utility, but it is possible. We had that same opportunity this year. I am pleased with what staff did to listen to, what at least some of us on council asked for, and not come back with a water increase that was at that max 4.5% that we as a council set a couple years back. So I am pleased with that work, and I actually am going to support the water rates because you did the work. But I think that we had an opportunity to take some of this money and put it into more roads, into not having as big of a water rate increase. But I understand, the path that we're on as far as the water plant. So it's important that, we fund that, because that's a big expenditure that is going to deliver clean drinking water to the city for many generations. So, but I think that we could have done some more work on this portion of the budget. The last part that I'll mention that I hear a lot about, especially lately, I am not against us expanding some of our navigator services when it comes to homelessness, but as I mentioned when we had that study session, I feel like we are not equaling what we're doing when it comes to accountability, assuring that law enforcement has extra resources to deal with some of the crime that we see in that population and how it affects the residents and the safety of the city. So I think that we had an opportunity to have a little bit more balance. In the last part of that $1 million that was put aside for ARPA for, potential future sites in Arvada and Lakewood, I think that we're going to get ourselves into a real problem, because at some point they're going to ask for those dollars that we promised, and we're going to have to pull them from somewhere else. The other half of that isn't just the dollars for that, it's the fact that we're funding some new positions that you're going to have to fund year 2 after that $1 million is gone. So I am concerned about the path that sets us on for that $1 million and potentially $2 million year 2. So, but, again, I want to thank staff for all the work they did and the council did on this. And I do think that it's not all bad, but it's just enough that I can't support this portion of it. So I'll be voting no tonight.
Thank you. I too will be voting no, just because I have great concerns over the $1 million that we set aside with ARPA to go for the pieces we were going to work with Arvada, and thinking, I don't know when it's going to happen, but when it all unfolds and it has to still come out of our budget, I don't know where it's going to come from. And we aren't made with a wishing well, and this money has been promised, and I just don't think we should have gone and spent it through this budget, saying, well, if they come to us, we'll get it out of this somewhere. So anyway, we did do good work. The other pieces that we have to vote on are different than this, but for a couple of the other things that I know are in there that I can't live with, don't support, and I have heard from several citizens and I don't usually hear from people over the budget. They have said similar things that have been testified here at our public hearings. So I'll be a no vote. So Councilor Carmelia.
Thank you. I'll add that this budget not only covers and provides the core services that we're known for, and covers for the traditions that Westminster is known for and proud of, such as the Westy Fest that we just had, which has been a success, not just for our city, but for the region, as we had visitors from all over the area, all the way down from Aurora and Cherry Creek. And it covers for the necessary infrastructure projects that our city needs for its future, such as the updates that were mentioned in the new courthouse that's coming, and the drinking water plant. And those are vital for our city's future. It also provides for a more humane emergency response for those on our streets in the winter, which helps out the individuals, but it also helps out our businesses, and our businesses are the ones that we need to thrive to keep a strong economy here in Westminster. And the budget provides for lowering the expected water rate next year from 4.5% to 4%, which, to Councillor DeMott's point, we want to keep that as low as possible. But any improvement is an improvement, and I'm proud of our team for coming up with a way to make that possible. And so I'm grateful to our staff for finding the means to make all of these various methods happen. And so ultimately, I think that the budget is something that we should all be proud of for coming up with a way to cover the necessary needs that we have and still provide for the needs of the citizens of the city.
Councillor Dumont.
Thank you. I just wanted to take a moment to share just in light of your comments in terms of the business. I do appreciate that this council really wants to support the businesses. I think I have a differing opinion about what that money is going to do for the businesses. And some of that is actually from hearing specifically from both residents and some of the businesses that were upset to hear that we're going to use that entire $1 million the way we're going to use it versus having some more accountability measures or resources that are actually going to hold some accountability to some of the things that they're seeing in the homeless population that are affecting their businesses, with crime and camping in their parking lots and things like that. So, I don't know if that's the perfect answer, but I certainly wanted to at least share that is things that I'm hearing both from our business community as well as our residents. So that went into my decision as I decided to vote against this piece of the budget.
Councillor Ireland.
Thank you, Councillor DeMont. I agree, and I've seen it for myself with businesses with break-ins. Near me, lots of theft. The Walmart on 136 has had a $3 million worth of merchandise stolen and that was up to September. We have a crime problem, and we need to address it, and it's not throwing $1 million to homeless people who have not made good decisions, and these businesses are trying to make a living. My neighbor who owns the DoubleTree in North Glen they bought the apartment building next to they bought the hotel next to his hotel to house homeless people. It is destroying his business. Homeless people are sitting out in front of the doors at his DoubleTree with drug paraphernalia and everything else, and no one wants to rent a room from him. And so he is really concerned about the crime. So if we are going to start doing this in our city, expect more crime, expect more businesses to have a hard time staying in business. So we need to address this crime and nip it in the bud instead of thinking that the more we give, the more compassion we have instead of consequences, that we're going to have better results. That's not the case, and we've seen it across this nation, what happens when there's no consequences.
Councillor Camerlia.
It is my understanding that at this time, our police force is nearly fully staffed, which is part of what this budget provides for, which is great news. And I think we should be proud of our chief and our police force for accomplishing that. And so we also heard from our judge that we are processing more cases due to that, bringing in more volume. And so our force is doing the work that they need to be doing. And it's also my understanding that the $1 million set aside for the Hopeful Navigation Center that we're using towards 2 new navigation resources, will likely consume less than half of those dollars. And so I'm hoping that, City Manager, you can speak to that a bit.
Thank you for the question, Councillor, and the discussion. Yes, confirm that our police department is almost fully staffed with some very, very low vacancy right now for it's really a record for us over recent history, and also it's record setting in the region among other police forces, so very low. And I do confirm that our municipal court cases are up as a result directly of the increase in police staffing. I will comment on, and if Mr. Lindsay beside me would like to add any clarifying comments, in the budget, it is accessing the current $1 million, which is in our funds, in an amount up to fund those 2 additional positions and then the additional vouchers and coupons. Those staff will not come on board for quite some time because there will be a recruitment and a hiring process. So it's anticipated that the amount used in 2025 will be much less than half and probably closer to less than a third of that amount. At the same time, we will be working with our colleagues in Arvada to pursue where they're at with the Arvada Center that they've been talking about, and we maintain our commitment to provide, per council's direction, whatever is needed of that $1 million at the time that it's needed. Mr. Lindsay can talk about at that time if we need to make an adjustment to where the positions are funded, we can do that, and then we would build that into the 2026 budget process, if that makes sense.
Mayor Pro Tem?
I had a similar question regarding just reminding us how much of that $1 million we were actually going to be using. My other question is, I know with our strategic plan, we prioritize safety, and so for the police department, was there a request for additional officers beyond the victim advocate positions?
Just confirmed, there was not a request this year for additional police positions in the police department outside of making the 2 victim services advocates permanently funded positions. And the reason for that this year is that they have up until now been grant funded positions, but those grants have been reducing over the years. And the decision that we presented to City Council was, do we discontinue the 2 victim services advocates or do we turn them into permanently funded positions? Because those provide those victim support services that is part of what Westminster is quite well known for in providing those services. So no, police did not ask for additional positions outside of making the 2 existing advocates permanent this year.
Okay, thank you. I just, I would hope that our police department is requesting the staff that they need to, follow our direction on trying to provide as safe an environment for both our residents and our businesses. And certainly we've had some emails coming in through our council emails that, we just continue to see businesses being impacted. So I certainly hope, again, that our police department feels like they have and feels like they are able to ask for the resources that they need. And if there ends up being something where we need to increase for next year's budget, definitely start to consider that. Thanks.
Councilor Dumont?
Specifically around the victim advocates, that wasn't coming out of the $1 million, was it? The navigators were, correct? Because it seems like we're mixing a couple things.
Confirmed, the victim services advocates are not coming out of the $1 million, up to the $1 million funding, that those will be funded from our general fund.
Great, thank you. A couple other points I'd point out is that $1 million, if we weren't going to use the whole thing, we shouldn't have earmarked the whole thing to move to homeless services. We should have kept $500,000 for the Arvada Center that is very likely to come forward at some point. The other thing that I would mention is and we've heard this, so I hate to put it on the spot. Policing is one of those military type places where they kind of have ranks and they go through proper channels when they share things. But when I start hearing from residents that our officers are saying that we're not doing the proper things to enable them to take care of safety when it comes to homeless, we need to listen. I will tell you that I was here when we had a horrible vacancy rate, and some of that is because we weren't listening. We as a city had, and I consistently back then would hear residents say that officers were sharing frustration about not being able to do the job because of policy. And that's not just city policy, that's also been the state of Colorado policy, unfortunately. But point being is, I take that to heart because I don't want to get back into the position that, myself, the mayor Pro Tem, Councilor Zadi over the last couple of years, and some of the former council people in leadership worked very hard to dig ourselves out of. And now we're, kind of a shining light in the metro area as far as vacancy rate. So I just want to make sure that we're mindful of that. And it's not because I don't think that we shouldn't humanize folks that end up without housing, but there just needs to be balance. And when we start hearing that stuff, I want us to listen. So, again, I don't think this budget's all bad, but I just want to be very specific about why I thought it was important for us to have a good conversation around it. And I think sometimes voting no is the right thing that you have to do to start those conversations, so that going into next year, we take that stuff seriously.
Mayor Pro Tem?
Thank you, Councilor Demott. I am wondering if there would be some receptivity to, I don't love doing things completely on the fly, but I mean, if there's a way to appropriate or to categorize like half the, if we're only looking at utilizing $500,000 or half of the portion for the homelessness services, that perhaps we can set aside additional dollars for something else.
Well, didn't we bring it up to 32 degrees that we have to house them? So that costs a lot more money, because our city and our state gets down to 32 degrees about every night in the winter. So I think $1 million is going to be burned through pretty quickly. So unless we change some policy or about temperature otherwise, and also the police need to tell us what policies they think we need to be tougher on, so we don't end up like some other these cities struggling with homelessness and paying for it and everything else.
Councilor Demott?
Oh, sorry. I just threw my button off.
And instead of, because I have a question over the whole $1 million, because currently we're supposed to give half to Lakewood, half to Arvada. And I think Lakewood's even further behind than what Arvada is, and that's so far away. My question is, why aren't we just supporting? I don't know what the history is with Arvada or with Lakewood, because I support giving the whole $1 million to Arvada for that's close, and that's where our people will be going. So that's more discussion. So, and I don't think we can do it tonight. Councilor Azadi or Councilor Hott, do you have anything?
Yeah, can you hear me?
Uh-huh.
I just wanted to add, so I wanted to add that I think everyone had some good points tonight, but there are several things I wanted to clear up. That this budget is very well balanced. The Arvada Center, we are still going to invest in it. I don't think we will have a problem. It's not close. I've talked with counselors over there, and it might not ever happen. It's very tenuous right now, what's going on over there. And even if it does happen on a fast track, it's 2 to 3 years out. So I think if we want to deal with the crime in our city, investing in homeless resources, it's preventative, right? It addresses root causes, mental health issues, stability. These are things that our neighboring cities are investing in. And the fact that we are now going to further invest in it only helps the region, because homelessness is not a Westminster problem. It's a regional problem. And we need to do our part. And all our neighbors are doing this, and they're trying to figure out, because they are also investing in public safety, like we are. By the way, we have the best police department in the region because we've invested millions of dollars. We have the lowest vacancy rate of our police department in the region because we've invested time and effort, and we do listen to them. And the issue with crime is not a police issue. because our cops do really well. That's not what's happening. What's happening is other cities are trying to figure out, and they're realizing that they need to become more preventative. But crime is not, border lines don't matter. Regional geographical lines don't matter with crime. And the regional issues that are going on, it affects us too. But the police department is doing great. And we have prioritized a lot of this, by the way, in our strategic plan back in April. We prioritized several objectives that are just coming to fruition with this budget. I've walked businesses recently, at least 20 a few weeks ago, much more earlier in the summer. I talk with business owners all the time. I walked downtown Westminster just 2 weeks ago, all the businesses. And we talked about homelessness and we talked about what they can do. And they said, look, if you guys just invest, we don't care what you do. We need to reduce the number of crime that we're seeing. What can you do? And I told them, well, we're looking at doing this thing, investing in more preventative resources and investing in more navigators who can connect them with permanent housing, things like that. And they said, oh, great. That's what we need. We just don't need reactive. What's not going to help us is if we continue to go on a reactive scale of when we see something, then police come and they figure it out. Crime has to be preventative. And I think we're doing a lot with mental health with this budget that we haven't done to an intensity level in the past. And that's why I'm really proud of what we're doing. And this $1 million that we're using, and this was staff's creation. Staff's idea was to, hey, because, Jody and his staff, they see what's happening in other cities because we've been asking them, right, this whole year, hey, can you please coordinate with Nevada? Please coordinate with Nevada. Please talk with their staff because we want this thing to happen. And they've been doing that. And when City Manager Andrews says, no, I'm pretty confident that this is the right path because he's been having those conversations with Nevada staff and he sees what's happening with the current status of the navigation center. And even if it was all perfect, it's still not next year that they would need this money. And then he says to me, well, even if we do have to do it next year, we can actually do it because he feels that there is room in the budget next year for it. So I think this is a win-win. We do something now, we are more proactive, and it will help the city.
Councillor Hott?
Yes, I can't say it better than Councillor Azadi did. I agree with everything he just said, and there's no way I could say it better. Thanks.
Thank you. Councillor Demott?
Just a couple quick things. I agree that mental health is really important. I was actually one of the ones who really was advocating for mental health, and that's why we have the co-responders here in the city of Westminster. Was actually after a situation with my own child during a strategic plan that I shared with the council. So I agree with Councillor Azadi that that's very important. However, I don't think it's being reactive when we listen. Well, I mean, it is being reactive when we listen to our police department, I guess, but in a way that we can then be proactive and figure out what things or tools or ordinances we're not giving them in order to combat the challenges that the homeless population might bring to our residents. The last thing I would mention is it was not staff who decided to move that $1 million. They were asked to move that $1 million by this council. They were asked to reallocate. They were asked to add additional homeless navigators. Just like the original budget did not ask for more police department or more police resources or full-time employees, it did not ask for this. We asked for this, or members of this council asked for this. So, but we could probably move on with our night.
Mayor Pro Tem.
Just one final thought on the homeless navigators that we're looking at adding in this budget. I hope that we can take advantage of state grants, particularly through Prop 123 or others. There are some grants that are focused in on staffing, and I'd love to be able to, in starting up staffing. So if that's something that our staff can look into, maybe we can mitigate some of the cost.
Roll call, please.
Mayor, can I say one thing there?
Go ahead.
Mr. Andrews, can you please clarify, did anyone on council come up with this idea of moving the $1 million, or was that a staff proposal that we then accepted?
Thank you for the question, Councilor. I was just confirming, staff was identifying a possible way to make that suggested budget amendment happen, and that's when we advanced a funding scenario. It was in response to council requested amendment to provide additional resources in this area. So staff did return, and this was one of the ways that we had suggested council look at the potential ways to fund it. Does that sound correct?
Thank you. Thank you.
Roll call, please.
Counselor Carmelia?
Yes.
Counselor Demott?
No.
Counselor Azadi?
Yes.
Counselor Hott?
Yes.
Mayor McNally?
No.
Mayor Pro Tem Nurmela?
Yes.
And Counselor Ireland?
No.
The motion passes on a 4-3 vote.
That brings us to Resolution 26. Mayor Pro Tem.
Move to adopt resolution number 26, establishing the 2025 pay plans.
Councilor Carmelia.
Second?
It's been moved and seconded to pass Resolution 26. Is there any further discussion? Roll call, please.
Counselor Demott?
Yes.
Counselor Azadi?
Yes.
Counselor Hott?
Yes.
Mayor McNally?
Yes.
Counselor Nurmela?
Yes.
Counselor Ireland?
It clarifies this, all the staffs, or just the police, or what was this? Can someone refresh my memory
25 pay plans for our employees.
for employees? No, you know why I'm voting no? Social Security recipients only got a 2.5% increase, and they've been paying into the system their entire lives. And our city employees are getting increase of pay that no one in this country is hardly getting. So I would be voting no.
And Counselor Carmelia?
Yes.
The motion passes on a 6-1 vote.
That brings us to Councilor's Bill number 32. Mayor Pro Tem.
I move to pass Councilor's Bill number 32 on first reading, amending Chapters 7, 8, and 12 of Title 8 of the Westminster Municipal Code concerning the amount and implementation of water, sewer, and reclaimed water fee rates.
Councilor Carmelia.
Second?
It's been moved and seconded to pass Councilor's Bill number 32. Is there any further discussion? Roll call, please.
Counselor Azadi?
Yes.
Counselor Hott?
Yes.
Mayor McNally?
Yes.
Mayor Pro Tem Nurmela?
Yes.
Counselor Ireland?
No.
Counselor Carmelia?
Yes.
And Counselor Demott?
Yes.
The motion passes on a 6-1 vote.
That brings us to Resolution 27. Mayor Pro Tem.
I move to adopt resolution number 27, setting the 2024 mill levy collectible in 2025, adopting the budget and capital improvement program for fiscal year 2025.
Councilor Carmelia.
Second?
It's been moved and seconded to adopt Resolution 27. Any further discussion? Roll call, please.
Counselor Hott?
Yes.
Mayor McNally?
Yes.
Mayor Pro Tem Nurmela?
Yes.
Counselor Ireland? Counselor Carmelia?
Yes.
Counselor Demott?
Yes.
And Counselor Azadi?
Yes.
The motion passes on a 6-1 vote.
That brings us to Councilor's Bill number 33. Mayor Pro Tem.
I move to pass Councilor's Bill number 33 on first reading, making appropriations to pay the expense of continuing the public business for the year 2025 and other purposes required by the charter and by any other law.
Councilor Carmelia.
Second?
It's been moved and seconded to pass Councilor's Bill number 33. Is there any further discussion? Roll call, please.
Mayor McNally?
Yes.
Mayor Pro Tem Nurmela?
Yes.
Counselor Ireland?
No.
Counselor Carmelia?
Yes.
Counselor Demott?
Yes.
Counselor Azadi?
Yes.
And Counselor Hott?
Yes.
The motion passes on a 6-1 vote.
It is 7:16, and we adjourn this meeting and go into our study session in the other room.
Counselor Azadi and Counselor Hott, can you hear us?
Yes.
Yes.
Yep, we're good, Mayor.
Okay. We welcome to the City Council study session for October 21st, 2024. Council reports. Councilor Azadi?
None, Mayor.
You are going to talk about your Halloween outside? Asking people to come and be seated
Well,
because they're dying for you?
Well, actually, I would like to talk about my food drive. So right now, I'm hosting a food drive that will help to fund two different organizations. One is Fish of Westminster. We are going to finance their lunch. The money we raise from the food drive will finance the annual Thanksgiving lunch that they host with several other churches and organizations for the unhoused. That's on Thanksgiving Day. And the other is that we're collecting canned goods and any food items that anyone has. If you have anything to give, we all have extra food most of the time. Please give it. You can reach out to me and we'll take all that food and we will give that to Growing Home. Growing Home has a food pantry that they are trying to get more resources for. So this food drive is really important. It's the second time we're doing it. Last year was for a different organization. This year we're doing it for these two. So if anyone wants to give. And to what the mayor's talking about, my daughter and I, we, for the first time, for the first time ever, we decorated our front lawn for Halloween. So what we're doing is it's the 5 villains from horror movies. So Freddy Krueger and those folks, they're having a tea party in the front lawn. So as trick-or-treaters walk up on Halloween, they're gonna see it. It's really super scary. We have music and everything. It's a super scary thing. They have to take a seat with these villains around the table, and they could take candy from a bowl that's in the center of the table. If they dare, if they dare to, they'll take a piece of candy and they can walk away if they walk away. So please drop by my home and you'll see this display.
And the seat says something like, "Have a seat, we're dying to meet you."
Yeah. It says, take a seat. We're dying to meet you.
Councilor Hott?
None this week, thank you.
Councilor Carmelia?
Yes, so Tuesday, we had the town hall for the drinking water plant, which I think was very successful. I got lots of different questions from residents on that project and handed those off to staff. And so thank you, staff, for being there and pulling that off and for providing so much information. I believe that the displays around the room had quite a lot of information on them. And they're a little bit more than the high level, so I appreciate that. And I'm hoping, I don't know if I've seen the responses go out for that, but I'm sure that we're working on those, getting all those questions answered for the folks that were there. So a big thank you to the residents that did turn up for that. I think that was quite successful in opening up the CAT, which is the Citizens Advisory Team, to the public, so that the public can be more involved and ask the team the questions that they want to know about. And then Wednesday, I attended Dr. I don't have a whole lot of updates from that. It was more just presentations on what we've seen in the past. We talked about the bus rapid transit again. We did select an advisory team from Dr. We selected 4 board members to be on an advisory team that will advise Dr. as well as a technical team on the $200 million EPA grant that Dr. received. It's for a decarbonization program that is being implemented over the Front Range over the next 2 years. And so the next steps for that is to now select, that advisory team will appoint a technical team, which will do the actual hands-on work to implement the program. And for those here, I am thinking about probably being on that technical team. So we'll see what happens at the next board meeting. And then, of course, we had Westy Fest, which was such a success. It was a really great time. And so a big, huge shout out to our staff that made that happen. I can't imagine the logistics behind the parking alone. So
Just getting the pumpkins there.
yeah, just getting exactly. Yeah. So thank you to everyone that was involved. I know it was a long day of setup and takedown, and I think it went beautifully. I got an overwhelming amount of positive feedback from folks, not just residents, but like I said, people from Thornton, people from Aurora, Cherry Creek. The fact that folks drive over an hour to be here, I think says a lot for how great an event it is, and what we do and what we put on. And so we're still getting the numbers for that. But we had a great time, especially hanging out at the arts and crafts booth. So thank you to Tomas for letting my family crash that booth for a while with food and kids and everything. So appreciate it. And I think that's everything.
Counselor Ireland?
I went to the EV meeting, the Driveways. Driveways, if you contact them, will personally help you find a vehicle that fits what you need. I do have some experience with pluggable hybrids, and there was a really good rebate from the state and some from Excel for if your income is 80% of the median, and also from the federal government. So the rebate for the state is going down after the first of the year. So if you're thinking about one, this is probably the best time to get it. But any other questions you have for me, you can ask me, because I know quite a bit about them myself. So they do admit that the infrastructure for them isn't there yet, and that's why I got the pluggable, because I have the gas alternative. But when you do register, the licensing is quite a bit higher on pluggable and hybrid, on EVs, because you're not paying the gas tax, so you get charged board to license it. Also this week I went to Westy Fest for a couple hours, and it was good turnout, good weather. Can't complain. We thought it would be cold and rainy. My church, I am sponsoring a dinner on the 21st of November with the Presbyterian Church for the less fortunate. If anyone wants to come help serve with me, I could use help serving at 5:30 Presbyterian Church in 73rd. So just let me know if any of you would like to help. That'd be great. That's the 21st of November, Thursday. That's all I have.
Counselor Dumont?
Last Thursday, I had my policy in Pilsner. It was a good time at Cocopelli Beer Company. You have one more opportunity this year if you want to join us for that event. We'll be doing the last one the third Thursday, which I think is the 21st of November, and then we don't do it in December. So hopefully folks will come out and join us for the last one. And then I did go to Westy Fest. I thought it was great. Had a lot of good conversations, had a lot of really good questions from folks that we passed on to staff. Thanks to the comms team for collecting those. I look forward to hearing some of the answers on those questions that we got. I did have a recommendation or a request, I guess maybe, of probably the worst thing I saw in terms of Westy Fest was trying to get into it. Trying to turn off of Sheridan into Westminster City Park was some of the things I was seeing was pretty scary. So I think it might be a good opportunity for public safety if we actually had traffic control allowing people in, because people were trying to, they would rush in because the light was turning, and so then they were either hanging out or they were, I saw quite a few near accidents, and I was only sitting there for about 20 minutes, so, which that's how long it took to get in there, but I think it seemed like it was ripe for a problem. So if maybe next year, if we're going to do that same, maybe we have traffic control out there.
Mayor Pro Tem?
I was out of town last week, but I do want to thank Councilor Carmelia for attending Dr. Cog. And I did, let's see, since the last time I know there, we had, I attended another Front Range Passenger Rail Committee meeting. And nothing too significant to report on that, but hopefully we'll have, one of the things that we did emphasize getting from the district is just an overall schedule and some more transparency in communicating what that schedule is going to look like to get us to a point where we have some clarity around what's going to be or around any decisions, like the timeline around decisions and what we're actually going to be voting on. I think that was all. The other thing was just I want to thank staff for putting on another, what I hear was a wonderful Westie Fest, so thanks again for doing that.
Councilor Carmelia?
Thank you. I did miss one item, which is that the North Metro Arts Alliance is having their benefit gala on November 9th at 5:30, and they are selling tickets right now. So if you'd like to buy tickets, the money goes to benefit our arts in the area, and so we're just trying to really raise awareness around that. Tickets are $50, and so if you want one or need one, you can email me or Kate Cook or anyone at staff, and we just want to help spread the word. So there is also a logo. If counselors here want to help share it, that'd be great. Thanks.
I had Mile High Flood Control meeting last Thursday. They do such great work. I always shout from the rooftops if every group worked like they did and spread the money so evenly, and we're just able to get through a huge agenda in an hour and a half is amazing. I was on a panel with other mayors in Jeffco and County Commissioner Del Kemper last Thursday, and we talked about unhoused and what's going on in each of the cities. I shouted out about our condos, and everybody was excited about that. Westie Fest was fantastic. So many little ones, and Jake, thank you for going and getting candy so that we had something to hand out from 4 to 8, and kids, the whole families were dressed. Great costumes. I'll never forget the little girl that her skirt lit up, and I thought, well, that's good because parents know exactly where she's at as it got to be dark. The balloons are always wonderful. Everybody loves those. I did a live video of that, and everybody was so appreciative that couldn't get over there that they could they could watch it. And this morning I had a 2-hour community reach breakfast with legislators. And from what I learned there, I told City Manager Andrews that this will be a legislative year that we hear about mental health because the numbers are staggering. The numbers of people that have left mental health are staggering, and the needs are huge. And they talked about from 11-year-olds and where it starts to the 25-year-olds, and that's the range. We really need people helping these folks so that they are productive and able to live good lives. I even asked City Manager if our SROs have training in mental health, since they talked so much about from 11 on. And for the community, if you would like to take mental health first aid class, they have those for free. Just contact Community Reach and they would be happy to sign you up. So a busy week. City Manager, you have a report.
Mayor, can I add one thing?
Uh-huh.
Just wanted to add on a special shout out to what you said about Jake. So Jake and Gracie from the communications team, thank you so much. You know, the mayor and I gave them a lot of, we teased them. We jokingly teased them that there wasn't any candy. And so he actually went out and got a bunch of candy, and it made a lot of kids happy. So special shout out to Jake and Gracie.
Yes, I gave him a hard time. I walked in, there's no candy, we're out of everything to hand out, and I said, I just give the team an F for today. And he looks at me, and I said, it said, don't you read what you guys put out? It said trick or treat. That means candy. So he went and got his candy. We were good.
All right, thank you, Mayor. Brief report tonight. Next slide, please. Tonight's agenda, thank you, everybody, and City Council for the special meeting next door. That's now been completed. That was the first reading of the City Council's city's 2025 budget, and we'll return next Monday with the follow-up second readings rising from tonight. In this room tonight, we have 2 study session items only. The first is the presentation on the Unified Development Code, or UDC, and then the second item is legislative policy and lobbying protocols presentation. Have the next slide, please. By way of city update, residents and businesses in our community have noticed some significant activity in city streets. Most of what you see that's not our work on streets is related to high-speed internet fiber network upgrades. Google Fiber and Intrepid, or T-Mobile, are both in the streets now. They've been issued permits to lay fiber throughout the city. MetroNet is next. They're expected to submit their application shortly. Staff has been working with them. Those are the 3 at this time that are active in the city. So if our residents have any questions about what's going on, just reach out to us and we'll bring them up to speed with what those 3 companies are doing. But effectively, Westminster is getting major high-speed internet fiber upgrades right now by these 3 firms.
Can I ask a question?
Yes.
I know when we first started this, and I forget who the first one was that we allowed to do this, and we said we'd like a map of where they are doing it so that we're sure that our historic Westminster isn't being left out of having these opportunities. So do we have maps for these 3, and can we be assured that the entire city is being given opportunities?
Great question. Thank you, Mayor. We are in engagement with these firms as to where they're going in, and the permits are site-specific, so we'll get that information out, starting with City Council. We do know where they're starting their work, and I think we have a good idea of where they're moving through the city. But let me confirm that for you.
Okay. Councilor DeMott.
So the fiber, I'm excited to see this, and I'm excited to see the 3 different options that'll be coming to the city. One thing that this has consistently been coming up in the Inclusivity Board, that they're interested in, municipal internet, and I know that the city has had that discussion before. And so I was just wanting to follow up, since this came up, to make sure that they are given kind of what was given to the council at the time that made them decide that that wasn't the right path for the city, or for the residents. Because I think that there was a really good discussion, and that was prior to me even being on council, but got to sit back there and listen to the discussion. So with so many different options coming, the other thing that I'm curious about with these 3 providers, I know Comcast specifically has a good program for low-income families to be able to utilize their service. So I'm just curious with these 3, as we move forward, if we could look in to see what options that they might have, because those are the kind of things that I think would meet the need of what the Inclusivity Board is after. So since we're going to get more options, I just want to make sure that we try to accommodate those folks.
Mayor Pro Tem?
Perhaps, and maybe we already have this, but it might be helpful to have a website or web page for this that provides links, because yes, not only does Comcast, but so do all of the other providers for internet. They all have some type of low-income service. So maybe if it's just kind of a clearinghouse, like, did you know you have this, call your provider kind of thing. Question about just how many we'll have, and then are they using the same conduit? Are they going to do, like, if there's 3 groups, 3 providers now, and ostensibly more to come, are they using the same conduit, or are they each individually laying their fiber in a separate space?
So these are all great questions. What it's telling me is we need to get an information memo back to City Council, and I'll ask staff to endeavor to provide as much of these details as possible in terms of all of the questions raised tonight. The The point of tonight was really to let our residents know that there's a lot of action in the streets, and it's around Google Fiber, T-Mobile, and MetroNet installations. And then what we'll do is we'll commit to following up to getting you more specifics about where they're doing it, when they're doing it, the services provided, and how to access those services.
And just one addition, the clarification on the where for me, in addition to the mapping geographically, but in the streets, because I know that there have been issues with other providers going in on in the rights of way back of the curb, where they're kind of disturbing landscaping for homes. And so I'm just wondering where these providers are actually going in. You had mentioned in your email potentially in the roadway itself. So that's my curiosity, and just how much disturbance, whether it's in the roadway or if it's back of the curb.
We'll get all that information put together in an information memo and get that out to you as soon as we can as a starting point, and then we'll provide updates as needed on that one. The last city update I would note is we do have some preliminary numbers on Westy Fest, so thank you all for your feedback tonight. I also attended, and it was a very positive event. Right now, it's looking like our attendance figures are right around 37,000 people that attended, and that for relativity or perspective, that's almost 5,000 visitors an hour entering the site. So very good turnout, and we'll get those official numbers back to you as soon as they're confirmed. Next slide, please. This week here at City Hall, the Tuesday meeting of the Planning Commission has been canceled, so no Planning Commission meeting tomorrow night. On Wednesday is the Library Master Plan Community Engagement Forum at the College Hill Library, and that's from 6 to 7 p.m. in the evening. So if you're interested in providing input or hearing more about the Library Master Plan, there's a community engagement forum on Wednesday night at the College Hill Library. And then on Thursday night is the Municipal Courthouse Project Open House. That's from 6 to 8 p.m. at our newly renovated swim and fitness center. So again, Thursday, if you're interested in what's going on for our replacement municipal courthouse, that's at 6 to 8 p.m. at Swim and Fit Center.
And doesn't that have trick or treat?
It may.
I think that's where.
I do believe so.
2 extra bags we're going to go.
Okay. All right, next slide, please. Next meeting of City Council, as you can see from the text on this slide, there's quite a bit happening next Monday night. We do not have any information-only items scheduled. We are presenting Employee Service Awards that night. That'll be the start of the meeting. It's also a proclamation for Indigenous People Day. We have 6 consent agenda items on, and those will be detailed in the packet. 5 new business items. One is an authorization to receive and allocate funds from the Colorado Emergency Medical Services Supplemental Payment Program. And that's good news story from fire getting reimbursed for our ambulance visits. The second one is providing for a supplemental appropriation of funds, and that's all around the CDOT and Westminster citywide intersection visibility and crossing safety improvements project. So that's a big one for safety at our intersections. The next one up is amending various provisions of the code to provide for authorization and regulation of accessory dwelling units. So that's in response to the City Council's direction. So that's coming back Monday night. And then authorizing a development assistance agreement with Sherman Westminster Station regarding the 228 unit workforce and market rate project at 6935 Federal Boulevard. And then the 5th new business item is amending the Westminster Municipal Code regarding occupancy standards, and that's also following through on Council's direction. There will be no public hearing items next week, and we will have the second readings following tonight's actions on the budget, and no post meeting on Monday. So a lot going on Monday. Of course, anyone can access that when packet posts on Wednesday at 5 o'clock. Next slide, please. You can always contact me directly at 303-658-2003 or jandrews@westminsterco.gov, and follow us on any one of our 4 social media platforms. And that's my report.
Thanks. And I know your piece said that we were doing Unified Development Code first, but Ms. Atwood and crew is up here first, and it's on my agenda first. So I'm going to let them go first.
Right.
Welcome.
Thank you. Good evening, Mayor, Mayor Pro Tem, City Council. My name is Erin Farrader. I'm the Policy Budget Administrator. It's great to highlight another function of the Policy and Budget Office this evening, our legislative program. State and federal legislation can greatly influence the city, its businesses, and its residents. To address and respond to the legislative matters, the city established a legislative program that encompasses lobbying efforts at both the state and the federal levels. State lobbying efforts are led by the city's state contract lobbyist, Amy Atwood, of Atwood Public Affairs, and the federal lobbyist team is led by Michael Dino, principal of Squire, Patton and Boggs. Annually, the city's legislative policy and lobbying protocols are reviewed and updated for current content to ensure that they are in alignment with the city's strategic plan. The legislative policy statement is to identify general legislative issues of interest to the city, along with the city's policy principles on each of these issues. While the city's lobbying protocols provide guidance to the city, board and commission members, and especially staff on how to communicate the city's positions most effectively to the city's lobbyists, legislators, regional partners, and the public. Before we look into our Red Line 2024 legislative policy statement and lobbying protocols to get your feedback, I'd like to introduce Amy Atwood, the city's contracted state lobbyist, to share her roles and responsibilities as we prepare for the 2025 legislative session that will begin on January 8th.
Great, good evening. Amy Atwood, contract lobbyist for the city. It is an exciting time of year for those of us in politics, and it's hard to believe that the election is so close. It feels like it still could be ages away, and then it also feels like we could be sitting in front of our TVs tomorrow night. So we work, as you know, we work all year. So if you think of the legislative session as the bookend to the year, so really, when we hit session ending May 8th, right around May 8th, and then there's a 30-day period where the governor can veto bills, so that takes us into June. Once we hit June 30th, that's the end of the year for us. So starting July 1st is when bill titles are being pulled, stakeholder meetings are happening. In election years, lots and lots of fundraisers, which are great opportunities to have FaceTime with legislators. And that's when the ideas start to percolate, and maybe things get on paper, maybe they don't. And that's something that we see particularly in election year, is that because all but 19 legislators are running for office, half of the Senate and all of the House are running, we don't see a lot of bill drafts until after the election. And then it's a flood of bill drafts, if we see them, because the drafters get behind. And I say this all so that when we see bills that are introduced next year and they're very, very messy, and sometimes you think, well, how could they put that on paper? Well, because the stakeholder process is different when you're in election year. The timelines get so crunched, and the first deadlines for bills will be in December. It's like December 2nd is the first bill deadline for the first 3 bills. So it doesn't give much time for legislators or the drafters. When we look at these documents, and what I wanted to share with you tonight was how important these documents are for the work that I do. This is the filter by which I look at all the bills. This is where I go back and back and back to these documents about what is your intent, your strategic plan, what is it that you want for the city. And then when we bring bills to you, it's because we've looked at it through this filter. So please know that the work that you put into the staff and the work you put into this document, it really is there are guiding principles so that we can fulfill your wishes. Let's see. As you're going to meetings, some of you mentioned this tonight, as you're going to meetings like Water, CML, Metro Mayors, DRCOG, you run in a different circle than I run in. So I talk to lobbyists and legislators and department and the governor's staff, that kind of stuff. So I know what you know what I know, but we don't know the spin or the filter by which each group is presenting those bills. So because you're with other municipal leaders and community members, you hear a different perspective than I do. And so when you're at those meetings, if you're forwarded a draft or you get a draft through in your packets with those, just shoot them off to me. Because the more information we share, the better. And I say that with drafts because we don't bring bills to you for positions until they've been introduced. And I think there's been some concern that we're not on top of it when it's in the drafting process. And we are, but I want you to also feel that you have an opportunity, ownership in that process too, that you know that we know. And so those meetings that you have that are coming up, I mean, I know CML just had theirs where they chose what proactive bills they're doing. I have that list. I knew what list you were looking at when you went into it. I'd been working with CML on that, particularly on land use stuff. So I just want to see if maybe that helps our communication too as we go through this session. So I know what you know and you know what I know. And then the state budget, you probably have heard, is in pretty bad shape going into next year. $950 million down if they just hold current obligations. Now there's a big state reserve. So there is a lot of money sitting in savings that will take up some of that, could even take up half of that, but that still puts us down $500 million. So the governor will be presenting his budget November 1st, and what that tells us are what are his priorities. And so when it comes to unfunded mandates, if the state can't afford it, sometimes it can get pushed down onto us. And so we'll be, our radar is 100% up for that, but also victim services. You talked about that earlier tonight, and those are the kind of things that we want to protect. I've been working with staff on where does the city get state dollars? Specifically, where are we getting state dollars? And we're working on that list so that I can work on protecting those dollars in the state budget. So that's a brief update. And I'm just really excited that I'm here this year when you're talking about these documents, because we work on them together.
Thank you, Amy. So let's shift gears to the packets that I gave you, the handouts in front of you. We'll start with the legislative policy statement. So staff and Amy took a look at our 2024 policy statement, and you'll see red line versions. Some are blue, some are green, depending on the author, but they're all red lined, based upon our strategic plan. And we wanted to go through, we'll go page by page, and if you have questions or concerns for us to address and make those additions tonight, based upon the feedback that we received this evening, not only on the policy statement, but the lobbying protocols, we'll be returning on November 18th for a resolution for you to adopt. The changes to them become the 2025 legislative policy statement and the 2025 lobbying protocols. So we'll start with the policy statement. Go ahead.
Can we have a quick debrief of people sharing how they felt last year went? So I don't know have we done that?
We did have an end of session discussion with you all in June, but we're more than happy to take feedback.
Well, I don't know how you feel, but I still feel as if we're on the outside, because we do go to other meetings, and I get more from them than I get from here. And we're in the transportation world, and I go to I listen in on AC Rep saying not a word. I am a mouse listening, because at least I can hear. Each lobbyist has different takes on different things, and I am a sponge to hear what they're saying, so I can ask intelligent questions at these meetings that I do go to, because I've listened, I've been able to ask questions in some of the realms, but in this realm, it feels like we work within a box that until we're told, we're we don't have a voice. And I know last year we asked to just sit in on, I can tape my mouth shut and just listen, so we understand what's happening down at the legislature and what the staff's concerns are. We suggested that the mayor and mayor pro tem be on those calls. This, even sharing stuff, and I did a couple of times last year with Amy, because some of the lobbyists and some of the groups we're in, we do work on the draft things to make the change that we want. We don't wait for it to get solid because it's harder to change things. So everybody does their stuff differently, but I have never felt so lost as I have the last 3 years, trying to represent our city in all of these other arenas when we don't have the same conversations. And I don't know how to exactly get there. I know what I've been told in the past, and I know what it was the first 12 years I was here. We had discussion, if not every 2 weeks, sometimes every week, if things were hot and heavy. So I don't know. I thought of you, and we haven't had a chance to talk, but.
Yeah, I think that, aside from, communicating back and forth when we have a draft of something, it might be helpful to just be talking about, hey, is there some strategy or, something where we're hearing something in a meeting where we can, voice something that would help get others behind, a change. So, because we can help catalyze other cities as well, just through talking with other counselors. And having a regular check-in, whether it's with staff, without staff, but just have regular check-in. I think the mayor is being used to that, and I think that could just be helpful, because then there's just a regular time where if there's nothing to say, there's nothing to say. But if there is a scheduled time where we go, okay, we're gonna talk to Amy in a week. Okay, we'll hold it there and we'll strategize then. That could be helpful, just have that penciled in.
Councilor Dumont?
I feel pretty strongly that we need to have some sort of voice at the table. I think that I was the advocate of having the mayor and the mayor pro tem be that voice. And I mean, we're putting some trust, if we go that direction, we're putting trust in them to make sure that if there's something that comes up that one of us cares about or thinks is important, that they're going to bring it back to us, because we're the ones having those discussions. And at the end of the day, we're the policymakers for the city, so it doesn't make sense for us not to be forefront in those conversations. I appreciate the fact that our staff are looked at as regional leaders when it comes to law in the state, and making sure that, we, like the municipal judge is a great example, where he's done, even when he was the pro tem before he got the big job, he advocated through 2020 and some of the challenges very hard, and was kind of a rock star in some of those conversations. And I would anticipate we continue to do that as a city. So, and I say all that just to say I'm okay that staff brings back the things that they think are important. But a lot of times in the last couple of years, I feel like the things that council would have thought were important is getting lost. And we're hearing about things when we are past that messy part where we could have more of a voice in it. Because it is messy. And I think in, my first 5 years on council, I feel like we had a lot more early input that was more meaningful with our stakeholders as councils. And so that would just be my reason why I think that that's important, because in the past, Westminster has been kind of a leader when it comes to a lot of the stuff that go on in the metro area. And I don't think that we're looked at that way in the last couple of years. And I feel like we're a lot more reactive when it's kind of already said and done in a lot of ways. So I would advocate that we, get in the front end of it.
Anyone online have anything to say? Okay, sorry, I just wanted to.
I don't have anything too much to add, but I think that Councilor Dumont made some really good points.
Thanks.
Thank you, Mayor. Thank you, Mayor Pro Tem Councilor Demott. We'll take this feedback, we'll regroup with staff and Amy, and we will come back with something that matches what you've suggested tonight as a way forward for the next session.
The last thing I would say on that note is, I mean, I certainly, as you come back, give us the feedback that you think is going to make some form of that be useful to you, because I don't think any of our intent is to get in the way. It's to be more productive and make sure that the voice of this community through its electeds is loud and clear. So I'm open to feedback, at least from my end, as you kind of think about our feedback.
Yeah, no, I can just tell you that we will take council's voices into account, come back to you with something, and it will be a value add. For the whole process. So thank you. I appreciate the feedback.
So if we have concerns now that we'd like them to think about, should we email you or talk about it here? Because I brought up cell towers and the lack thereof in our area. Like, it's a safety issue, and we can't get any of these Verizon, AT&T, or anything on board to get us service that we need. And I think it's almost a state issue at this point.
We do have a section in here on telecommunications. I was going to also bring that up just to see if there was something that additional we could add. So I think when we get there, let's add that in.
All right, let's go to page 3.
Thank you very much for this feedback. That's why we are here tonight, to start this conversation and to work together throughout it. And as we navigate, at points we may need to pivot because we'll try something and we're not necessarily hitting the mark, and that's where we'll ask for your feedback. So if we need to adjust, it's not a set in stone. We need to start someplace, especially with the protocols and the policy statement, but we can adjust with your feedback throughout the session. So thank you for sharing it. This is how we start. We can't get on the path if we don't hear the feedback. So page 2 is table of contents. Pretty straightforward. It's going to change once we change some things in here. On page 3, we have our overview. Nothing really of substance has changed. The second paragraph was just trying to make it cleaner of the positions that we would take. Added in some contact information for Chris to be a bit cleaner. And then beginning at the bottom of page 3, we start with our, yes?
I just wanted Chris to have an opportunity to be sure that he wants his name on that specific thing. Brave man.
It's out there anyways.
Page 3, the bottom page 3, we begin with our strategic plan, updated based upon our current strategic plan. And as if that changes or pivots throughout the year, we can always adjust. So that takes us on page 3, 4, and 5. And then we start on to page 6. And Councilor Demott, this speaks to what you have been, the importance, making sure that we're capturing what's important to you through these policy principles to make sure that we try and catch things sooner than later. So I'm just gonna list each one, and if there's something based upon what you've read prior to the meeting that you wanna add or you have questions or concerns. So I don't necessarily read through each one, it's 14 pages. I don't wanna waste your time. So the first one is economic development. The only change that we've made is just a minor word change. Any other questions or concerns?
5?
If anybody online, just holler at us, because it's easier than always calling out your names.
Okay, moving on to general finance, the bottom of page 6. Again, the only change that we made, which would be the same of 6 and then also with government immunity, is we changed the word citizens to residents. But there was no, go ahead.
I mean, I don't have a problem with the change, except for it should be residents and businesses, in my opinion.
Is council comfortable with that change? Okay. So we'll make that change throughout the document. When we reference one, we'll make sure we reference both.
Thank you.
So as we turn to page 7, government immunity, the same thing, the ones residents have to go to residents and businesses, as appropriate. Moving on to home rule and local control. Just a bit of wordsmithing on that first bullet. Bottom of page 7, human resources. Other than spacing for the bullets, there's no change to that section. Continuing on to page 8, land use development and revitalization, no change. Bottom of page 8, mental health. Based upon some of the conversations that we've had related to the Rocky Mountain Metropolitan Airport and some of the sound, within mental health, we added mitigating excessive noise as part of that.
I think that's good, and I appreciate the ad. I would just say that because there's actually two specific things that come to mind for me, because we hear a lot with the street racing is the other one, that those are probably two of the bigger noise complaints that we get that would fit in that, so it would be nice to be specific around those.
Street racing's much louder than the airlines, and we're in the flight path too.
We have that in.
Yeah, it's in.
I'm hoping street racing is probably in some other areas too.
Yeah, it is.
I don't think we have noise necessarily.
It keeps everyone awake, so that's the reason I would put it under noise and mental health if you can't sleep.
Moving on to page 9, parks and open space. We had some additions to not only qualify, we talked about open space, but we called out parks as well, in addition to active recreation spaces and our trails, just to expand as we're looking at some of the legislation, that it's encompassing all of our recreational and open space activities within the city. Moving on to public education, no changes are proposed. Bottom of page 9, beginning of public safety. Again, residents, we will make adjustments of residents and businesses.
Oh, this is where I have one. Isn't this the one, there's street racing there, it supports legislation that imposes more severe penalties for auto theft, catalytic converter theft, and street racing. It's right in the middle of the page 10, but there, isn't there my fireworks?
A third of the way down.
Support legislation that strengthens the city's ability to prohibit the use and sale of all fireworks, along with legislation that allows counties and fire districts to prohibit and otherwise control fireworks. What's its meaning?
So I was looking back actually when you identified this earlier. We've had this in there for a number of years. It's really, this is around the city's home rule authority to be able to regulate fireworks if the city council were to do that. So it's really supporting our home rule authority.
We can still have our 4th of July at the city park.
Absolutely.
This one made me jump a little bit. I thought maybe you put it in there just to see if I reacted.
This is not a change. We'd still be allowed to have fireworks on the 4th of July for the city. Yes, ma'am.
Anybody else?
Moving on to page 11, sales and use tax. No proposed changes.
Residents and businesses again.
I'm sorry, I'm sorry, I didn't hear you.
Page
Sorry.
11, right? Is that where we're?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I
Yes.
think that they were gonna change that.
Okay, great.
Moving on to state and federal mandates,
Talking about that.
changing residents, change it to residents and businesses. Moving on to sustainability, focusing more on the environmental component. And turning to page 12 for the bullets, we added the first bullet to eliminating the use of leaded aviation fuel, also adding supporting legislation that provides incentives for water conservation, reducing the urban heat island, and promoting green building. And then the final bullet that we made in addition would be residents and businesses.
And I think we come close to hitting on it, but the first line, I would just suggest supporting legislation and regulations that promote pollution prevention, decarbonization, and then also, I just don't see the word decarbonization, which is a pretty hot topic at the moment. And then we do say in bullet point 4, we support legislation that prevents for climate change, which the decarbonization is obviously a factor for, so it would make sense to have both.
I think I would need to know more before I agree to that, what it entails, because plants thrive on carbon.
I can just provide a tiny bit of information. It entails supporting legislation that works to reduce or offset carbon emissions, which are causing climate change, which we already have climate change in here as a reactive component, but having this in there goes on the preventative side.
Well, I would be for it, so I think it's a lot of regulation. It makes everything cost more, and people are already struggling. So I'm not for it. So we're in an impasse.
This is Counselor.
Go ahead.
This is Counselor Hott. I agree with what Counselor Cornelia is proposing.
Would you feel comfortable if in bullet 4, where we're saying supports funding for legislation that prepares, protects, and helps Coloradans recover from the impacts of climate change, including wildfires, poor air quality, heat, floods, and other impacts potentially from carbon emissions, and as a more broader term?
I don't think that will make a difference.
That would be better for me.
Because that's after the fact either way, like that doesn't actually make an impact. So if we're just changing words to change words, there's really no point. So no, I don't think that there's any point to that.
And also pollution prevention is a broad term depending on how you are interpreting carbon emissions. It could wrap in within that, and part of our intention as we are going through our policy statements is they're broad intentionally, so they're not too specific to cut us into one corner and not into another. So potentially, if we see something along those lines, it would fall underneath the pollution prevention.
Right. That makes sense.
I did have one regarding the second to last bullet. We have opposes legislation or standards that weaken current air quality standards or regulations. Maybe it's covered in the first bullet, but I certainly would want to see standards that would, or efforts that would reduce air quality impacts. So I mean, maybe it's under promote pollution prevention, but for me, it's more like our construction, especially with development, whether it's dust or the vehicles. So I don't know, maybe it's.
Are you saying instead of opposes, which we won't oppose, but also support?
Yeah.
Because we don't have actually the action there. So another bullet point for support legislation or standards that strengthen air quality and regulations.
Yeah, that address air quality impacts, like direct air quality impacts.
So the 2 bullets above the supports funding for legislation that prepares, there's a poor air quality there that potentially that could, in a broad stroke, encompass. And as we're having this conversation, this is also creating an awareness for us. So even though it's a broad stroke, the awareness is created. Those are words to be mindful of as we're looking at legislation.
Well, that's from recovering. For me, it's more about having better standards for the construction activities themselves. We have development near us. We're kind of in a zone of growth. You know, even if it's not us necessarily, it's Broomfield, it's Thornton. I would just, anything that, because I see it as development is occurring, these construction vehicles, but I know it's more detailed.
More regulation you have, the more it's gonna cost to build things.
Well, that's more the
But Uplands
companies.
have been doing all kinds of things they shouldn't do, and no one said a word, so.
It's not us, it's the contractors that are in their vehicles.
Well, there's dust down there they haven't controlled half the time.
Well, yeah, I mean, it could be about better dust control or mitigation.
You guys want to chew on it and bring us something back?
Thanks.
Thank you. Moving on to telecommunications.
Cell towers is here.
Your time to shine.
We also added a call out to broadband and digital access market based on some of the feedback discussions.
Well, I hate to regulate industries, but when citizens honestly don't have service at their house, and they can't even call 911, we have a problem, and we have lots of those places in our city.
David?
I agree that we need to figure out how we do it, but I think sometimes the carrot approach is good. So I don't know what the state is doing to try to make it something more appealing for these groups to build more cell towers. And I think the same for the city. Are we, state or the city getting in the way at all? I mean, there's probably federal regulation around that as well. So, but fostering legislation that, encourages it is really what we want, because we want better coverage.
Like equitable coverage.
I think
I'm not
that's a
here,
good way to
I'm
put it.
afraid if I got in a wreck, I couldn't call out.
You can't call out on
Yeah.
I-25 and 136th either. We've
I
had
can
wrecks out
There's
there.
blackouts too.
Oh, yeah.
I have blackouts all the time.
Sheridan,
Yeah.
going.
Yeah.
Where have we lost all of our phone conversation?
Yeah, I'm on Church Ranch, just hold on. 60 seconds, I'll get through it.
If
Okay,
I'm
just
here,
need anything more there?
we'll also wordsmith something along the lines of fostering legislation for equitable coverage, something along those lines.
And I just want to add, I'm sure we do, but for a little while I was in aid at the House, and I saw that the IT committee, I think it was, just generally did not get a lot of attention. We didn't get a lot of public comment, we didn't get a lot, it kind of got ignored, it wasn't really a priority, and so I just want to say, can we, if we are, then great, but can we pay attention to what they're doing and, give them, our ears, just to see what they're up to and make them a priority for our city. Yeah.
There is a broadband and telecommunications interim committee that meets, and we track that as well,
Awesome,
so.
thank you.
On the bottom of page 12, transportation and mobility, which continues on page 18. The only thing that we did is that the third bullet, we split into 2 bullets, which would be the third, and then we took it down to the 5th bullet, proposing efforts to eliminate the completion of the B line. So we just separated. Yes, ma'am.
I didn't want to limit, there's something in here where I don't want to negate the opportunity to get rail service, even if it's not exactly the B line. So I still want us to pursue the B line, but if there are other ways for us to get service, I guess we did have one that was earlier than later or something. Where is that? Or just in a timely manner.
Yeah, and that in a timely manner has been going since 2004. I just want to remind everybody, it was supposed to be done in 2017 and we're in 2024. So timely manner means nothing.
Yeah, I get I am totally, the mayor and I are in lockstep on wanting the Beeline service. I just, when I read this, it just made me pause thinking, you know, if we're able to get some service sooner than later, you know, like through the Front Range passenger rail, doesn't mean that it takes, so I just want to make sure that we're clear that,
We can do both.
yeah, that we can do.
It's time for us to get some
Yes,
more of the pie.
Yes, and Beeline, just service and. So,
Because
it
we'd
looks
be
like-
the second tier of the
how about it's support,
passenger rail.
support efforts for the completion of the Beeline? I don't know, I'm just,
And adding stops in Westminster in general
Yeah,
to
I
any
don't-
of the.
yeah,
I wouldn't, I'm fine with supports, but I'm also for opposes, like, because there have been specific moves to try to eliminate that beeline. And we,
Yeah.
the mayor's point, we've been paying for it an awful long
Yeah, I
time,
know.
so, like, I think if you're gonna do something that goes after other, like, intentionally goes after other, potential rail, that's fine with me, but, I like this one.
Because that'll be on
as
top
is.
of yet another tax.
Yeah,
right, I just want some clarity in here for when we're at
Right.
meetings where, like, we want some service, and, that it's clear in here that it's giving us the
Right.
ability to say that.
Because it'll be two different taxes, so.
We just don't like want to pay for something we're not getting. That's what,
Yeah, so maybe
Like
it's
the
just an
Beeline.
extra bullet.
like the Beeline.
We can wordsmith it to allow not only supporting the completion of the Beeline, but also alternatives,
Yeah.
so it doesn't lock us in one or the other.
Thank you.
We can do that.
And I'd say strongly oppose any efforts to get rid of the beeline.
Moving on the bottom of page 13, water resources and treatment. If you turn to page 14, we added proposed legislation that has a negative impact on the municipal water industry and ratepayers by incurring environmental cleanup liability that should be the responsibility of the entities responsible for the pollution.
I like that.
That's good. The last one on page 14 is workers' compensation, and no changes are proposed. So what I'm tracking is 3 changes. One within sustainability to capture air quality related to construction, drafting something along those lines, and then in telecommunications, drafting a bullet related to fostering legislation for equitable coverage. And then within transportation and mobility, supporting the Beeline with alternatives, yet also opposing the elimination of the Beeline. So we'll wordsmith those 3.
I would just say that for the first one, I would just say for protecting air quality, period. I
Air
wouldn't
quality, okay.
quantify it.
Okay. Is council, is city council comfortable with?
But no, that's under their construction.
No, exactly, but that's the conversation. We start broad, but we're hearing where those finer points are, and that's where we take our direction, so thank you. Okay.
And since Amy's here, can I just share, I was at a community reach breakfast this morning, and Senator, what is she, her face just went before me. Who did I say? Larimer County.
Okay.
She worked with Zenzinger.
Okay.
Okay, and Representative Byrd
Okay.
were there today. And it sounds as if, because of the amount of money and whatever's happened with Medicaid and mental health, they're asking on the Joint Budget Committee some very tough questions of some departments, looking at consolidating, getting rid of, or.
Healthcare policy and finance, HICPUF.
Yeah,
Yeah.
and, no, that's a county commissioner. I'll think of Kirkmeyer.
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 Yeah, okay.
Kirkmeyer. So they were both there, told the gloom and doom about mental health and how it is going to be not a very good session this year, because they talked about the money they've blown through since, the state has, since some change was made with Medicaid. And nobody can share what happened to that money. And she's asked, and she's on week 2 of waiting for an answer. So they're asking the right questions and tough questions. And they're asking, like 10 other subsidiary departments have a piece of mental health. She said $1 million is $1 million. So if we can figure out, is this the best way to deal with things? And these other 2 departments that have admin and everything, they're just looking for how to deliver mental health because we're at a crisis. And of course, Community Reach shared that they lost over 100 people during COVID, and people aren't clamoring to come back in. Then you have all the cities looking at what they're doing for the unhoused, and they just said there's not enough resources at all. So it made me rethink a couple of things that we're even doing, because it's going to be a crisis. And with school funding, you fund that totally, and with Medicare and Medicaid, it takes the rest of the money and you have this much for everything else. So as I read this a second and third time today after that meeting, I thought, there's not going to be a lot of other junk, or there might be some other junk in there, but it's not going to go anywhere because there's no money.
Right.
I mean, if it has money attached, there's not going to be anything. So.
And what you're talking about is that people rolled off of Medicaid. They stayed on through COVID, and then they naturally were rolling off for eligibility. And HCPF has gone back to try to find people to say, you are still eligible. But their budget is the same as if they had all of those people still. And where did all that money go when they've been off the rolls now for a year?
Yeah.
So that's, yeah, and
It's going to get messy.
it is.
And so anyway.
As it should. I mean,
Yeah.
there's a
They're
lot of
asking
money
great
there.
questions, yeah. And they're bipartisan group, just as Zenzinger and Cookmeyer were for the local control issues that they were successful at. So I just wanted to share, that was a big piece today. And there was a co-responder from Westminster there, myself, and then 3 counselors from North Glen.
Great.
It was a very good 2-hour session, but it's pretty, I didn't realize how bad it was.
Mayor. I guess we both have thoughts. Mayor, I had one more thought. To dive into this first one, I've just been wondering if it would be appropriate, because I don't see it at all here, but I'd like to bring it up for discussion. And I wanted to move through this first, but for the first one, especially seeing the residents' letter here that relates exactly to this, I'm wondering if we should have something under economic development around the Airbnb, around supporting legislation that might limit Airbnb, or not them specifically, all the other vendors that do that. You know, either their ability to buy up houses in our cities, or limit their ability to, you know, have a certain number of homes in a city. Or in general, we've heard a lot of complaints from residents throughout the year just on how many cars are outside, or the use of a house. But I would be supportive of a bullet in here with something around that. I mean, we have the one above it, the very last one that has renters' rights, which is really good. And then through that made me start thinking about just that section of it, that piece. How can we put a bullet in there for that? So I'm wondering if there's support.
So I'd look like, I would look to our attorney, can we not sell to different people that are going, if you know they're going to rent?
Well, I think the question is, could the state legislate in that area? And if they think they can legislate in that area, do we want them to? I agree with the premise, I think, behind your question as to how do you regulate the purchase of private property and who's eligible to purchase private property.
Yeah.
If the state thinks they can legislate there, then perhaps they can. I don't have a legal opinion on their ability to succeed in that.
I don't think I'm for it. I know that there's corporations
buying up houses and how we stop that, I don't know. Individuals is another thing. Corporations is more a concern for me.
Councilor Dumont?
We recently passed something in the city that's still pretty new, so we're not exactly certain how it's, and we're probably due for a report back on how that's going as far as our Airbnb.
Short-term rentals.
Yeah, short-term rental legislation. But I personally don't like when the state decides they're gonna start dictating that stuff. I'd be more if they start doing things saying, here's how you need to do it, or here's what you have to do, or here's what you can't do. I would more want to make sure that we're being allowed to do what's best for Westminster, not what is best for the state. Because, you know, the state's big and diverse, and what's right for Denver is not necessarily right for us. So, but, you know, it would probably be good. I don't know if you've seen what we did do in the city already. Might be a good opportunity to share with the council where we're at on that.
I do know HOAs, a lot of them have in their covenant, you can't have Airbnbs, so we have 65% HOAs, so I don't know how many say that, but there's quite a few. And if the state overrules that, I'm not for that either, you know, whatever they say.
Well, and just to, and the staff can correct me if I'm wrong, but specifically what we put in place is like a limitation around how many Airbnbs you could have. So it's not necessarily limiting how many properties an individual or a corporation could buy, but it would limit how many properties that they could license as a Airbnb or short-term rental. Is that correct?
I believe so, yeah. I think their short-term rental regulations have limited to one per person, right? The licenses that can be issued.
In the city.
And we went as far as to figure out, or at least try to make sure that people weren't, you know, making loopholes by doing different LLCs. They still had to have a registration of who the LLC was registered to, so that we could avoid people just signing up for an LLC and then having multiple.
That's good to hear.
What about corporations, though?
Yeah, that was gonna be my follow-up to Councilor Ireland's point. Yeah, do we have any sort of limitation on corporations buying our houses?
We'd have to go
Aren't they
back and look at
considered
it.
people?
Yeah, well, I don't know
For
that
federal tax.
regulating the transfer of property, whether it's individuals or corporations, I don't know that, that there's a way necessarily to limit the property acquisitions. But I think as a city, we had a structure, a regulatory structure, where we would control the number of licenses. So if it was Acme Incorporated, they could have one property, and they wouldn't be entitled to more than one.
That makes sense, okay.
Thing about corporations, they hide it with another corporation, so they're all connected somehow.
I did, well, one, yeah, I think we should, I agree, it would be great to get an update on the short-term rental progress, and, I'd probably prefer to have a locally driven approach, because there's so many differences between mountain towns and rural versus urban areas, so that's my thought on that.
But to your point, that was part of the reason why we wanted to hear back a year later to see like, okay, how's it going? Or, because we had some of those same concerns going into it. So it'd be nice to hear how it's working and if there's any tweaks that we can make.
So just one more thing for this, for consideration. One of the big issues, I think I brought this up the last year, was the AAA, our area agency for aging, has lost a lot of money. And so I would love to, you know, because our population continues to age, we have a lot of folks that are housing burdened. They're just really impacted by reduced services. So I don't know where exactly it would go in here. It just affects our community a lot to not have services, like whether it's Meals on Wheels or whatever the case may be. So I'm wondering if you might be supportive.
I am very supportive. I know that midway through, or maybe 3/4 through last session, there were some bills that came up as our inclusivity board worked with Senior Resource Center. And they were sharing with us, you know, some of the potential opportunities or lost opportunities of funding that they were seeing go by the wayside. And as we continue to go at lightning speed towards the silver tsunami, I don't see how we couldn't support that. So I would definitely be in support of legislation that puts the state more in a posture of going after funding for seniors, because they're going the wrong direction.
Yeah. And they're only getting a 2.5% Social Security increase, like I mentioned, which is not keeping up with inflation at all.
I just want to say back, just so I'm tracking the same page, so are we in agreement to add a fourth bullet, and we'll work through staff-wise to figure out where it fits in to capture supporting legislation related to senior services or something along those lines? Okay.
Increases funding or
Okay.
services.
We can work on that fourth one. And so just shifting gears to our lobbying protocols. This is a short one, 4 pages. We've gone through the bulk of it. So starting on page 1, this is attachment B in the handout. Official city position. Much of the redlining in the first paragraph is just splitting out in a bulletized of the options of positions that can be taken.
I just have one question on this, and this is more to assure that we don't accidentally do something. And I had asked I don't remember if it was in a meeting or if I just asked Dave, but what the ability when you guys are asking for like information back from us to utilize BCC when you're putting city council down, so that we don't inadvertently reply to the whole council and start a meeting inadvertently. I know that there's, it's a little more lax in terms of things that are legislative, but I think just in general, that would be an interesting practice to look at, if we could do that just to avoid that, because I think that sometimes there's staff members that we want to hear our answer, but maybe not city council, because that's where it gets into us either purposefully or inadvertently, or because we're not paying attention to what we're doing, getting into a meeting that probably causes Dave heartburn. So if we could look and see if that is something that's a legal option, especially when you look at stuff like this, that could just be part of how you guys pull us to make sure that we're not violating open meetings laws.
We can explore that. So speaking of how we poll, in our current protocols, we have the ability to either agendaize the item or utilize email, depending on the cadence of the session. If we choose to utilize email, and that is the preference of city council and their direction, what we would do is follow up after the email poll with an information only, to then share the official position of the city and the majority support of that position, not support necessarily that word, but using support of the position taken by the council.
Just for me personally, I like the way you guys do it, and you've always been really good about saying, hey, we need an answer. But I will tell you that I have 6 email boxes. So if you truly need an answer quick, and this goes for anything, just a quick text to say, hey, check your email, and I will do so, because text is just, in my world, is used for emergencies. And I know we do that in a lot of different areas, so I would just expect us to carry that through.
We're not shy about doing that when need to.
So flipping that first page 1, the beginning of page 2 is just.
Oh, just a second.
Oh, yes, ma'am.
On page 1, the second paragraph that gets down to may facilitate greater collaboration, greater negotiation power, and building and maintaining a relationship with the bill sponsor or other key stakeholders. I have seen us sometimes bend over backwards to try to make a bad bill better, and we still end up with a bad bill. So I personally, if it's a bad bill, I'm not afraid to tell a legislator why I can't support something because it's not a good bill. And why support something that's not good and you're just putting lipstick on it to make everybody feel better? If it's a bad bill, it's a bad bill. And I'm just saying out loud, it's okay. We should have a relationship with our legislators to be able to say, here's why we can't support it. because it's not a good bill in our world. Here's what it does, blah, 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 because very few of them have walked in our shoes and know how it's going to affect us, and they don't come and ask as they're just making bills. So it's okay to say no, and it's okay to say it's a bad bill. I'm just saying that out loud because you'll hear me say it if it's a bad bill. And I don't like putting lipstick on pigs. You can go to 2 now.
So beginning in the middle of page 2, representing the city at CML, Dr. Cog or other groups. This speaks to how, based upon our legislative policy, if the city has not proposed or has not made an official position, you can make a position based in alignment with the legislative policy statement, but then coming back and sharing it with City Council, as Mayor Pro Tem did, I think, two weeks ago with Dr. Cog, similar along those lines. But just gives direction on, if you're in those meetings, how you can correspond. Any questions or concerns? Building along those lines on page 3, testimony at the Capitol. Okay, moving on to lobbyist interaction. We've just made some minor changes, just. Aaron, hold on. Go ahead.
Well, on the lobbyist interaction, I'm just curious. I mean, you don't have per se a problem with this. I'm just trying to operationally think how this works, because there's times where, you know, it used to be that it was a designated person by the city manager. So with this change, if there was somebody who's like a subject matter expert, like I had mentioned earlier, the municipal judge, and so there were times that we were providing feedback to them. So would I read this to be, you know, Chris is kind of the point person, and if there's somebody that we need to talk to below that, we would get to, or would all be filtered through Chris?
Right, because I could see like Chris Jovan or something for transportation stuff.
Great question. Let us wordsmith that so it allows that flexibility. So as the example that
I mean, I understood it that way. I just want to make sure that it was the way I understood it, that it's kind of more, instead of Jody having to be the one, since Chris is ultimately the running this group, that, you know, he's the point person instead of Jody.
But we can make sure we're clear in the language that's used, so it isn't confusing or misinterpreted. So
Appreciate it.
We will wordsmith that. Thank you for the question.
I'd almost have it lobbyist interaction and staff. And then what we discussed at the beginning can be whipped into this area too.
Yes, we can draft some proposal. We'll see if it's the right fit here, or if it's something that allows us a little bit more flexibility, given that these are adopted. Maybe it's something that we start off. So let us look through and figure out the best option to allow us to be nimble as we navigate this partnership and communication. But we will include it somewhere. And then flipping over on page 4, finishing off the end of that section, just minor edits. Any other questions or concerns?
Appreciate all your work.
Thank you. I'm tracking 4 edits on the policy statement, revising the lobbyist interaction and staff to making sure that we're clear of the designee, and then whether it's in this document or an attachment somehow, just to make sure allowing flexibility and throughout the session of how we coordinate together. So our next steps, we'll be making these edits, and then we'll come back to you on November 18th to adopt both. Thank you very much for your time.
Thank you. Thank you.
Okay. Okay.
Okay, we need a 5-minute break.
Okay.
Has everybody chance to?
Come back here.
Abby, can I mute these?
Sure.
Sorry.
Welcome back. Next up is presentation of the Unified Development Code. Welcome.
Thank you for letting me be here tonight. I'm Andrew Spurgeon, Long Range Planner in the Community Services Department. I'm joined by my manager, John McConnell. Tonight we'll be providing a brief update on the proposed Unified Development Code, or UDC as we call it. Knowing that City Council has a keen interest in this subject, staff is here with this presentation rather than an information-only type of format. So that's why we're here tonight. This slide shows the overall anticipated timeline for the UDC. We did introduce this to you last December 11th. We were here to talk about this. We were in front of you on June 17th to talk about some of the new state planning and housing legislation. And at that time, as we talked about, in order to provide some time to analyze all that, work on the UDC was slowed down, but we're picking up again, and that's why we're here tonight. If you look at our existing Westminster Municipal Code, which we like to abbreviate WMC, Title 11 was adopted by City Council in 1997. It was the culmination of work that actually began in 1988 to completely restructure how our codes are working relative to land development. So it's really 6 of the 16 chapters in Title 11 is the focus with the Unified Development Code. Those that are highlighted in orange. Given the limited amount of land inventory, we don't think we really need to completely reinvent our system. So we're leaving in place the engineering standards, the building codes, which were actually just updated in March of this year, would also stay in place. So really thinking about those. And then we have these 7 other sort of standalone documents out there that we navigate with our development customers. We have 4 different residential design standards, our retail commercial design guidelines, our traditional mixed-use neighborhood design guidelines, and our landscape regulations. So really we would take those 6 chapters of WMC and these standalone documents, and combined is what the Unified Development Code is. So it's a one-stop shop for people trying to land develop in Westminster. This is just a real simple graphic. We've had some trouble when we present to audiences kind of separating policy setting from what the UDC is. The UDC is regulations, it's the instructions for how to develop land. Policy is really informed by our comprehensive plan, the sustainability plan, the transportation mobility plan, the findings of the redevelopment and adaptive reuse toolkit, and more recently, some of the recommendations identified with the housing needs assessment. So again, thinking of the project scope, it includes zoning, site planning, architectural design, and procedures, unified. The scope is citywide. It's not geographic specific. It's not retroactive, but will be used prospectively with applications to develop land or redevelop land. Downtown Westminster and Westminster Station have specific plans in place, which are very detailed zoning and design standard documents. Those will live on their own. And there's really not a lot of land left in the city. Every time I'm in front of you, it's smaller and smaller. So if you look at the sites that don't have development applications working on them, this time it's about 2.3% of our land area, about 501 acres is what's left. And those would be the primary impact of the Unified Development Code, as well as what's not on there is existing sites where there may be some type of redevelopment or perhaps some limited infill where there's space within a commercial environment or something like that. We provided an information-only memo to City Council on April 29th, recapping some actions in the housing arena, but we realize housing is important to the City Council. It's in your strategic plan as a priority to provide access to diverse housing choices. So with the context of the UDC, just sort of recapping some of the great things that have already been done by this council and prior city councils. Condo defects, this is something that was put into our municipal code to support condominium development and provide an avenue for fair adjudication of defects claims, really due to the lack of action by the state on that. We have the specific plans for Westminster Station and downtown Westminster that I just talked about. One of the advantages of those is really it's a streamlined development process of going directly to an official development plan without the need for the negotiation of planned unit development. The residential service commitment competition, that was sunset in 2018. So the program of having residential applications once a year, that's no longer in place. Which actually was fortunate because now the state has actually made it illegal to have that kind of pacing system. But we were ahead of that. The city's zoning process has been used successfully through the years with rezoning to require inclusion of income-restricted units with large developments. This was done at Bradburn Village, where 25 out of the 805 units have a maximum purchase price. And more recently, with the council action on the Uplands development, there were a minimum of 307 units to be reserved for those earning no more than 80% of the area median income. And they actually exceeded that. It's more than 300 units that are being provided with that income limit. So it's certainly within City Council's authority if that's something you want to see when you get rezoning requests in front of you. That's potentially a condition that could be included. Earlier this year, you did adopt updated building codes, and it may have sort of flown under the radar, but with Appendix AQ of the International Residential Code, actually this council did enable tiny home development, so that is something that can be done now. And last but not least, the comprehensive plan, it did introduce a chapter on housing, which was sort of a new topic area, or at least the way it was given attention. The city's housing paradigm for many years, decades, was focused on executive housing, and so to try to step away from that, to support more of a spectrum of housing types, was something in this current comprehensive plan. And I'll just spend a little more time on the comprehensive plan on this slide. Again, it establishes some of those policies that the Unified Development Code will be trying to turn into code language. And so some general themes there are just, aligning our development requirements, understanding the limited remaining land inventory, and particularly to the extent we know those remaining sites can be rather challenging. And this is why they've been passed over by earlier ways of development in the city. So thinking about that land inventory and what considerations are needed there. Thinking about providing avenues for special needs housing, missing middle housing, and senior housing. Those were all things in the comprehensive plan. It did identify accessory dwelling units. We're not going to spend a lot of time on that with the Unified Development Code because staff is bringing forward a separate ordinance actually next Monday. So you'll have that very quickly in front of you. That standalone ordinance would at a later time be folded into the Unified Development Code. Thinking about how we can improve alignment between the comprehensive plan and their zoning districts. Right now there's pretty much no connections, which is why for various reasons almost everything becomes planned unit development. So thinking about what are those opportunities to more transparently correlate the land use in the comprehensive plan with zoning. And then finally thinking about issues identified through the redevelopment and adaptive reuse toolkit, thinking about how do we right size requirements when facing difficult site challenges. So again, I'll sort of recap.
I'm sorry, could you just define by right zoning?
Sure. By right would mean there's a zoning that's in place on a property, and assuming someone was able to develop under the uses or standards of that zoning district, it would just be something that was allowed. It wouldn't have to have a necessarily a public hearing before city council.
Thank you.
Good question. So thinking about our current work, we've kind of divided this up. Our phase one is what we're currently working on, what we're contracted to work on. And then I want to offer council the opportunity, if there's some other things that you'd like to add on, we can talk about that. So again, we're trying to make sure there's policy alignment with our comprehensive plan, sustainability, transportation mobility plan, and some of the other things that have been done, making sure those are reflected with the Unified Development Code. Organizing it into a one-stop shop instead of having to jump around between 8 different documents. For residential uses, again, thinking about missing middle, special needs, or senior housing. Getting away from minimum lot sizes and making sure dimensional standards support efficient site planning and opportunities to support lower price points on housing. Yep. Commercial and employment development, really simplifying our commercial districts. We have several commercial districts that most people don't use. In fact, we have one district that actually isn't being used anywhere in the city. It's just kind of floating out there. That's our B2 zoning district. So really looking at revising those and providing avenues to support commercial revitalization by adding uses, creating mixed-use settings as well as live-work units, which is fairly limited under our current provisions. Creating standards for office and industrial development. This has always been unique to think about. We currently apply our retail design standards for office and industrial development, and we've done that fairly well. We've gotten some good projects out of it, but tailoring something more to the needs of what we hear from the business community, where we can balance aesthetics and sense of place with practical considerations such as security, access, and loading would be helpful. In the sustainability realm, thinking about what's in the sustainability plan and how the Unified Development Code could support recycling, food access, low water using landscapes, sustainable building materials, provisions for renewable energy generation, protection of natural areas. And we do remember there was a comment at the December study session about solar access to yards, and so we have taken that into account as well. Building upon the transportation mobility plan, thinking about things that could be put in the code to support mobilities with street and trail connectivity, transit stop enhancements, electric vehicle infrastructure, bicycle parking, and revising the parking requirements. So that's really in our current scope of work. We would offer to City Council a couple of potential additions if you so choose. The first of those would be some sort of improvement for affordable housing procedures. Because the city has opted into Proposition 123, there is a requirement to put in place a 90-day approval process for affordable housing. That deadline is not till 2027, so it's not something we have to do at this time, but if council wanted to, we could put that in with the Unified Development Code. So that would be the first one. The second one would be to formalize the use of inclusionary zoning. As I mentioned, this is something the city has done at Bradburn Village and then more recently at Uplands, where we've required a certain number of units to be affordable. And you have the authority to do that. It would probably be helpful, though, if we had something written in our code that explained that, so applicants could understand the expectation and people could just anticipate that. Probably more legally defensible. I'm looking at Dave. So again, those would be potential add-ons if that's something council would like to do. We are not at this time proposing to add on the House Bill 241313 transit-oriented communities, but we'd like to keep that on the radar. We'll be back, I'll be back in front of you on December 2nd with an update on that and what we're looking at in terms of the potential impacts to the city and what our options are. So I'll be back and we can talk about that at that time, but just to keep it on the radar that it does impact the work with the code. So in terms of our next steps, We're going to continue that legislative analysis and come back to you. We will be working towards a 60% draft, and so we would like any thoughts you have tonight and whether or not you would like to add on those two potential scope additions that were mentioned. Trying to wrap up the first phase in the first half of 2025. That's all I have for you tonight, but I appreciate the opportunity to be with you, update you on what we've been doing, and hear from you in terms of where we go from here.
What's your public review and comment? What are you planning?
Well, we haven't exactly written that out yet, but we wanted to make sure there was some way for people to think about, you know, what are the options if we want to provide housing? You know, what are the type of options we want to make sure we have code provisions for? If we want to support small businesses, what are those things that move the needle on that? Same with sustainability, mobility, those sort of same key topic areas, whether it's online, in person, or a combination of the two is kind of what we're thinking.
We had people come by and ask for, where do they look for all this stuff? I said, it's coming.
Okay.
So,
Good to know.
as soon as we know how we're going to get it out to the public, we can all make sure that we get that done. Can you go back to slide 9? So, okay, so for the first thing, he wants to know if we want to add the affordable housing procedures changes to meet Prop 123.
I'll say it. I support that.
I do too. Okay.
I don't support it. I think we got too much low-income housing already. I mean, that's all we approved. We have nothing for the middle to buy. We have not approved anything for the middle since I've been on here.
Councilor Namella?
I think it would, since we have, and we'll likely have more solidified guidance on the application requirements, I think it makes sense to incorporate it into this round.
A lot of mixed, a lot of apartment.
So,
So you have majority to go forward. And then inclusionary zoning, you want to formalize it?
What's that mean?
Well, inclusionary zoning is when a certain percentage or certain number of units in a larger residential development are reserved for people at a certain income level. And we can come back to you with options. Is it, you know, less than 80% AMI, or is it workforce where it's 80 to 120% AMI? There's different ways you can craft this. And so we would come back to you with some sort of recommendation on what we think that could look like. Again, this is something council has done. This would just be formalizing it into the code.
I'll just add that I believe that this helps prevent areas of our city that, you know, put a bubble of a certain income level all in one spot, which can cause disturbances sometimes. And so I think that this is the most equitable way to do it, and I think that it creates a healthy distribution of homes, and so I think it makes sense.
Christine looks like she's going to say something.
I'm not for it. The problem with it for me is it makes it more expensive for the other people around. Don't tell me it's subsidized by taxpayers. All these projects that we have done lately are subsidized by the taxpayer. So someone is paying for someone else's house. And our taxes keep getting higher and higher and higher, and it's making everyone can afford a house. Don't say this stuff is free. It's not. Someone has to pay for it. The rest of us have to pay for it. We're subsidizing someone else's house. And I personally work 4 jobs, my husband and I, to afford our house. So if people want to afford a house, they need to work more. That's all there is to it. That's how it goes.
We're just trying to give the council options based on your prior actions.
Well, that's how I feel, because other people are paying for their house.
Councilor Namella? I mean, Mayor Pro Tem, sorry.
I think it makes sense to try and negotiate into larger projects that might be able to absorb it over time. Working on one for my day job right now, and there are a lot of implications with respect to the development community and land prices and home prices and all that. So I think it behooves a separate analysis. we don't have a ton of huge projects coming in, so I'd prefer that I don't know, I don't know how effective it would be. I know some communities have taken this on, even when they're mostly built out. I just haven't looked at it through that lens specifically.
I'm making this up as I go. I might suggest another option would be, as we continue with the HB 241313 stuff, which is, basically higher density housing around our transit. We could propose something with that effort. Instead of putting it in the Unified Development Code citywide, it would be limited to those transit areas.
I could see something like that. I would love to see just, Denver put theirs into place a couple years ago, or maybe it's been a couple years by now.
Yeah.
Just, kind of looking at what has the success rate been with those that have been adopted. I wouldn't look at Boulder because it's like a different beast over there. So that's all. It's just what would be successful for us.
Yeah, it wasn't legal in Colorado for a long time. It was legal like a long time ago, and then at some point the state made it illegal. And then it was legalized again, 2-3 years ago. So there may not be a huge track record yet. I know in Denver there was this flood of applications by developers to get their applications in before it hit. And I think they're still working through that inventory. So, but that would be interesting to find out what's working or what's not working. We're fairly neutral on this. We just know that council has done this before, and if it's something you want to keep doing, it would be helpful to, formalize it in code.
I just think we need the affordable housing dispersed throughout the city, not in just one area. And right now, we have it really condensed in one area, a little bit into downtown and just a hair into downtown. They built 4 different big apartment complexes next to transit at Church Ranch, and not one is affordable. Not one is affordable. They're starting at 2,000 and go up to 4,000. And the 2,000 is for a studio. So that's just not right. There should be, it's a huge transit with supposedly, supposed to have train there someday. Right now it has the Flatiron Flyer, but it's right on top of transit. So it has nothing. So, and I don't know, there's not a bunch of land left there, but I think of wherever we're going to do senior, it can't just be all high end at all, because we know that some of the people that may not be able to stay in their homes or whatnot, they're on fixed incomes, and some barely making ends meet now that use some of our services. So if we know with especially that senior population, we have to be cognizant that some are living on their Social Security, which we had a council member that got $599 a month for her Social Security and had to live on that. I don't know, she's a great friend and I don't know how she did it, but we have to have places that have all of those opportunities, because it can't just always be high end. So I would be in favor of looking at it just for that. Counselor.
So this is what I know.
Mayor,
This is what I understand.
can I say-
Oh, go ahead, Obi, and then I'll talk.
Go ahead.
So sorry. So I just wanted to say that I agree with the mayor. So inclusionary zoning is a win-win almost, where we do need more affordable housing dispersed throughout. And what this does, why I think this is important, and we did talk about this during strategic planning in April. I brought it up. I think a few others brought it up, and our housing assessment that we did also brought up this recommendation that this is important to at least start to look at. So I'm in favor of this because I think it helps to address housing shortages without heavy subsidies. That's one benefit. Council Island, you might like that. It's a nice way of addressing affordability to what the mayor is saying without actually having to give heavy public subsidies. That's one. I think it diversifies neighborhoods. It creates mixed income communities, right? So that's social cohesion that we all keep talking about that we want to see. That's one tool that can help develop and foster more of that by not having it all in one place, but having it dispersed throughout the community. I think it does help, and it gives folks like lower income folks, fixed income folks, better access to better schools, right? Because as we know, schools are the higher end communities are located near the better schools. So I think it's a win-win, and it's a win-win for affordability. So I'm for formalizing it.
Councilor Ireland?
Well, this is, I've read up on some of this low-income housing, especially in Denver. What they're seeing is the builders want to build less low-income housing when it's mandated because they aren't making the money unless they're getting publicly subsidized. Then they build high-end stuff to subsidize it. So there's no middle. That's the problem with the whole thing being mandated. Because there's no middle. There's no incentive for builders to build middle.
This is Counselor Hott. I just want to go on record saying that I'm for inclusionary zoning.
Thank you.
I'll just say, yeah, if we can get some of the answer, I think you can hear some of the answer, or some of the questions, just answer, some of the questions that are coming up, and I think just being able to have those answers ready, because I think there is definitely a willingness to try this out.
Yeah, and this is tricky, so I don't think we'd come back and just put an ordinance in front of you. I think we'd come back maybe with some options, and then you can tell us which of those appeals to you, and then we could then take it into code language.
We haven't heard from Councilor Camero yet.
Thank you. I was going to give a response, but you said it more eloquently than I could, Mayor, which was that what I dislike about what was said around the trans-oriented, yes, we absolutely need it there, but again, it concentrates it into just one area of the city when I strongly believe we need it throughout for all the reasons that Councilor Zadi and the mayor listed. So I'm for it.
Councilor Demott?
I'd like to see what you come up with, similar to the mayor. You know, I've heard this the entire time I've been involved, is that it needs to be more dispersed. I'm specifically interested in more senior affordable housing, not just though, like when we look at senior though, we need all the different levels of senior housing, because there are folks that aren't going to be able to afford their homes but won't qualify for that. So I don't want to put all our eggs in one basket, but it certainly is a component of it. One of the other things, and I know that there's been some legal problems around it, is I know Denver tried to do it, and I brought it up before, as far as like where you mix the units in versus having a whole development of affordable. And so I certainly am very interested in that, because I think that is one step beyond just having it in different geographic locations. That's also, you know, you're not singling people out so that they live in the affordable housing development versus, you know, being included. Granted, I've heard the mayor say this multiple times, if anybody hasn't got the chance to go see some of our units, specifically the one off of, was it 74th and Federal-ish?
71st.
That's a great example of, you wouldn't know that that's affordable units. It's a beautiful facility.
If I blindfolded you all, put you in a van, and got you into an apartment, I'd ask you where we were, and you'd have no clue. They're beautiful.
I'd have to say that, and I know that I was concerned, still am, about just kind of how they fit St. Mark's in, but if you actually go look at the St. Mark's development as far as the product over there, they're very nice living units.
Probably the biggest problem is not parking for the handicapped, not enough.
Yeah.
And they're having to walk blocks. Even in the neighborhood where they've got 9 people living in a home, we've got 9 cars And this parking issue is becoming a problem quickly.
And that sounds like we're eliminating it under this, because that's what the state wants.
Yeah.
I thought we were gonna do our home rule when it came to projects, not what the state dictated.
Yeah,
That's my
that-
problem with this whole thing.
And that's what we'd like to talk to you about when I'm back on December 2nd is we're going to do a little bit of a deeper dive on that recent state legislation, 3 different pieces, and talk about, what staff's analysis are, what your thoughts are, and then where do we go from here.
What else do you need from us tonight?
That's it.
Oh, I had.
Oh, sorry.
Just a few things.
Just a few.
I just had jotted down, just emphasizing for the infill, not just to allow it, but to have, standards around, making sure we don't get slot houses and things like that. I know we talked about that last time, so just a reminder. I was curious, you kind of answered it with respect to whether we would be aligning districts and going through the districts again. So I'm assuming that's part of it, so I'll just, I think that's great. And then as you go through the districts, my last comment was around the clarification of how we classify certain types. You were talking about like different, like special needs housing. So when we talk about memory care or assisted living, sometimes we've classified those in the past as commercial versus residential. And so giving ourselves some flexibility on being able to locate those in more residential areas. Whereas sometimes we kind of had, oh, it's commercial, or, or if it's a commercial use, but we'd like to be able to put it in, in a neighborhood or something. So that's my one thought there.
Yeah, we've been having that struggle as we've actually had some proposals recently, and it's like, well, don't you want that kind of product in or within residential areas so there's, the other generations can support them?
Yeah, I guess, like the site in Bradburn, for example, that just sort of left there and it hasn't really developed. Like if we could put some senior housing, it's supposed to have some affordability, but having senior affordable, oh my gosh, when my mom lived in Bradburn, she loved it because she could just walk everywhere because she couldn't drive.
Yeah.
So, it's just thinking about how do we accommodate those types of uses in more areas.
Well, and Thornton had not a huge piece of land in between some apartments that weren't like this together. They had an apartment building and green space so people have space to be outside and enjoy, and then there was another unit and another unit. So in the midst of that, right along 120th, just say it's a square like this and here's the sidewalk. And they ended up putting in 2 homes that have memory care. So it's not circular, but I've been in this developer's models before, and so each person has their own bedroom. Then you have the common area, you have the kitchen, and it looks like a regular home, but it's for memory care. And so they were able to put 2 homes that filled that space, and then be able to make a big circular drive to get in off of 120th. I just think that fits in so well with, and I know what it is. It looks like 2 homes, but I know it's memory care. And I just think with the pieces around them, they probably have volunteers that come in and work with those people. And I mean, when I volunteered at Colorado Lutheran Home on the Alzheimer's unit, we'd bake cakes and decorate and talk about things, but it was interesting how the smells made them remember different things. So, because they don't know what they did an hour ago, but they know what they did in 1937. And that's where you hear, how they planted sugar beets and everything. And so what I learned was take an hour off after I volunteered because my head was so into 1937, 1942, and in the 50s from whoever I was talking with, and you want them to talk or they lose it. I couldn't go to a budget hearing, and I did once right after I left, and I'm going, oh, my head is, I can't be here. So I learned to just take an hour off and get back into whatever year I was in. But so I think in some of those crazy spaces, I don't, even the tiny homes, I love some of the tiny homes they're coming out with. They're beautiful. My husband says I need one in the backyard for my she shed.
Well, next week.
My ADU.
That's right.
It's coming. We hope you're
Thank
excited
you.
about an ADU ordinance.
Thank you for all your work.
Yeah, thank you.
Quick question, Mayor.
Uh-huh. Go ahead.
So, I have a quick question. So for the condo defects protection, can you give the technical answer as to what we did specifically to enable, to protect against what the state wasn't able to, that enabled the condos?
I'd have to spend. I'd have to. I could send something as a follow up to that. I know I think there was a question not that long ago, possibly from Councilor Demott about that. So we could probably find those
Do
notes.
all the time.
I didn't personally work on that ordinance, so I don't know what the exact ins and outs of it.
Jody speaking, that was some time ago. We'll get back to you with what that was. I recall that City Council took the steps that it could do. It was limited, but it was what we were able to do under the state, the current situation in the state. So it was limited, but it was effective. So we'll get a report back to you on that.
I think if it would
Thank
be
you.
helpful, we could also find the agenda memos
That's right.
and the drafts that were considered and then ultimately passed, whether that was 2016, 2017. But at that time, I think the goal was to develop an ordinance that would mitigate risk to encourage the building of condos because we were told the insurance premiums were really high. And I think the way to mitigate risk for the builders was for this ordinance to address how claims could be asserted against builders within our city. So it was an effort to I think, put some guardrails on the scope of the claims that could be asserted. So happy to help with that research so you can see exactly what we passed back in 2017.
Perfect, thank you.
Councilor Kimberly.
And I do have one more issue I'd like to talk about around inclusion, just to get the discussion going. I don't know whether this can be done, probably not proportionally like affordable housing is, but what can we do to make a few more accessible units? You know, I have friends in wheelchairs and it's really, really hard for them to find a place to live, and then they have to customize a whole house, which is extremely costly, you know, and you're at $100K often. And so I don't know, maybe if we focused on this, it wouldn't maybe not be a proportion, but a number even, if we said, okay, 1 or 2 units need to be accessible. And maybe this isn't formalized in the document, but maybe we can just at least get the conversation going. What can we do to incentivize a few more builds? And I have heard some of the things we passed this year did have some of that, but how can we get, you know, developers to look at that as well?
Anything else? It is 9:33 and our meeting is adjourned.
No way.